Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR Official 24 channel. Jack was in pain, and the moment he stepped into the dimly lit room, he could feel every muscle in his body screaming at him, the tension from the day's chaos weighing down on his shoulders like an unbearable storm, and Phyllis, ever perceptive and attuned to the subtle shifts in his demeanor, immediately recognized the strain behind his eyes, the barely contained anguish that he tried to mask with his usual veneer of stoicism. And without a second thought, she closed the distance between them, her arms wrapping around him in a protective, almost desperate embrace, a silent offer of comfort that spoke louder than any words could, and Jack, who had always prided himself on his resilience, felt an unexpected shiver run down his spine as the warmth of her presence penetrated the defenses he had so carefully built over the years, allowing him, if only for a fleeting moment, to lean into vulnerability and acknowledge the exhaustion and grief he had been bottling up inside, a confession of weakness he rarely permitted himself to utter, and as Phyllis held him, whispering soft reassurances that seemed to soothe the very core of his being, a subtle promise lingered between them, unspoken yet undeniable, the kind that carries the weight of years of unspoken understanding and complicated history, a pledge that Jack, in his fragile state, instinctively clung to, unaware that fate had orchestrated a twist of cruel timing, because just beyond the doorway, hidden behind a partially closed frame, Diane had been standing, her sharp instincts and curiosity having led her here, and she froze, breath catching in her throat, as she observed the intimate moment unfold, every nuance of Jack's pain, every subtle tremor in his voice, every tremble in Phyllis's grip, and then the crucial moment came when Jack, with a vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to show, whispered something that Diane could not help but overhear, a promise, tentative yet filled with an intensity that made her stomach tighten, a commitment to Phyllis, a declaration of sorts that resonated far beyond the walls of the room and beyond the mere words themselves, loaded with implications that Diane knew could alter the dynamics of their intertwined lives in ways she could not yet fully comprehend, and as she stepped back, unsure if she should confront them or retreat and process what she had just witnessed, her mind raced, replaying every syllable, every inflection, every subtle glance between them, trying to decipher the depth of Jack's intent, because she knew Jack well enough to recognize that when he spoke with such raw honesty, it was never frivolous, never casual, and that this moment, captured in the private intimacy of the room, could potentially shift alliances, loyalties, and affections in Genoa City in ways that might ripple through every relationship, every business deal, every lingering grudge. And as Diane wrestled with her conscience, the image of Jack in pain, clinging to Phyllis as if she were his anchor in a storm that threatened to consume him, seared itself into her memory, making it impossible to unsee, impossible to ignore, and yet, alongside the empathy she felt for him, there was a pang of jealousy, of fear, of the subtle, inescapable realization that this moment was one she had not anticipated, one that challenged her assumptions about Jack's heart, about the delicate balance of his affections, about the silent bonds that had formed and shifted over years of friendship, rivalry, betrayal, and unspoken longing, and as she watched him slowly pull back, brushing an errant strand of hair from Phyllis's face, her own emotions became a turbulent storm, a mixture of concern, envy, and an unsettling curiosity about the path Jack was now choosing, the promises he was making, the loyalties he was redefining. And in that instant, Diane felt a surge of urgency, a need to act, to intervene. Yet her mind hesitated, caught between the desire to protect, the instinct to interfere, and the shocking acknowledgement that perhaps some truths were meant to be observed and felt rather than immediately confronted. And while Jack, oblivious to Diane's presence, continued to confide, to share the unspoken burdens of his life, Phyllis responded with a tenderness that seemed almost ethereal, a combination of empathy, understanding, and a fierce protectiveness that Diane could not help but notice. The kind of connection that was rare and profound, capable of withstanding storms, yet equally vulnerable to the tremors of misunderstanding and jealousy, and as Diane slowly retreated into the shadows, Her mind replayed the exchange endlessly, each word a potential catalyst for future drama, each gesture a symbol of shifting alliances, and she could not escape the gnawing thought that this moment, witnessed by chance yet now indelibly etched into her consciousness, might set in motion a chain of events that could redefine relationships, spark confrontations, and unleash secrets long buried. While Jack, feeling a small measure of relief in sharing the weight of his pain, remained unaware that the very promise he had made, tender and sincere, would soon be thrust into the spotlight of Genoa City's intricate web of intrigue. For Diane, ever vigilant, was now a silent witness, a keeper of knowledge that could change the course of Jack and Phyllis's lives forever, and the thought of what might happen next, the revelations, the confrontations, the ripple effects across friendships, business partnerships, and family ties, loomed large in Diane's mind, a tempest of anticipation and dread, while Jack, still clinging to Phyllis, felt a fragile sense of hope, a tentative belief that in opening himself to her, in acknowledging the pain he had tried to hide, he had taken a step toward healing, toward connection, toward something meaningful that could endure, not realizing that the consequences of his honesty were already in motion, that Diane's knowledge, like a hidden spark, had the potential to ignite a firestorm of misunderstanding, suspicion, and conflict that would challenge every assumption, every loyalty, and every carefully constructed facade in the lives of those entangled in this drama. And as Diane silently backed away, the image of Jack's pained expression and the quiet intimacy of his promise haunted her thoughts, a reminder that in Genoa City, no moment of vulnerability, no whispered vow, no tender embrace ever existed in isolation, for secrets, promises, and overheard confessions were the lifeblood of intrigue, capable of reshaping destinies, altering hearts, and exposing truths that some might wish remained buried. And in the hours that followed, Diane replayed the scene over and over, analyzing Jack's tone, Phyllis's responses, the subtle gestures of reassurance, the hesitant yet powerful way the promise had been made, and she felt the stirrings of a plan, a way to navigate the turbulent waters she had inadvertently become a part of, knowing that what she had witnessed was both a privilege and a burden, a chance to influence outcomes, yet also a responsibility fraught with peril, because in the world of the young and the restless, emotions, promises, and loyalties were never simple, never straightforward, and every act, no matter how small, could ripple outward in unpredictable ways, affecting friendships, family dynamics, romantic entanglements, and business dealings in ways that could be explosive, transformative, or devastating. And so Diane's mind raced with possibilities, with strategies, with the potential fallout from Jack's vulnerable confession, while Jack himself remained ensconced in Phyllis's comforting embrace, seeking solace in the moment, unaware of the silent observer who now held the knowledge of his secret, the promise that bound him in ways he could not yet foresee. And as night fell over Genoa City, casting long shadows over its streets and homes, the tension between what had been shared, what had been overheard, and what might soon be revealed hung heavily in the air, a testament to the intricate web of relationships, desires, and conflicts that defined their lives. And though Jack felt a fleeting sense of peace in his connection with Phyllis, Diane's presence and her awareness of his promise ensured that this peace was temporary, a fragile bubble amidst the inevitable chaos. And the stage was set for a series of confrontations, revelations, and emotional reckonings that would test the strength of bonds, the depth of trust, and the resilience of hearts, proving once again that in Genoa City, no moment of honesty or vulnerability could ever exist without consequence, and that even the most private of promises, made in pain and sincerity, could become the catalyst for drama, heartbreak, and unexpected alliances, forever altering the landscape of love, loyalty, and ambition in ways that none of them could fully anticipate. And as Diane slowly retreated into the shadows, her mind spinning with the implications of what she had just witnessed, the echo of Jack's whispered promise to Phyllis reverberated relentlessly in her thoughts, each syllable etched into her consciousness like a branding iron, searing questions and doubts that she could not shake, because she knew Jack's heart was complicated, layered with loyalties, guilt, unspoken desires, and an enduring sense of responsibility that often led him to make choices that defied expectation. And as she pondered the consequences, her gaze drifted briefly to the faint glimmer of the city lights through the window, the bustling energy of Genoa City continuing obliviously to the intimate storm she had just observed, and she realized with an almost painful clarity that what had transpired between Jack and Phyllis was far from a fleeting moment of comfort. It was a pivot, a hinge upon which future events could turn, a secret seed planted that, once uncovered, could germinate into revelations, confrontations, or heartbreak, because in Genoa City, nothing remained private for long, and secrets had a way of surfacing at the worst possible moment, often with explosive consequences, and Diane's heart pounded as she considered how Victor might react if he learned of this, knowing his protective, sometimes possessive streak regarding Jack, and how Nikki, with her enduring intuition and empathy, could sense the tension, the hidden emotions, the subtle shift in dynamics between Jack and Phyllis, and how Abby, with her impulsive nature and penchant for drama, might seize upon the knowledge Diane now possessed to manipulate, influence, or exploit the situation for her own ends, and the thought of these intertwined reactions made Diane's head spin, the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest as she moved quietly through the corridor, trying to formulate a plan, yet simultaneously grappling with a torrent of emotions: jealousy, curiosity, concern, fear, and an unsettling awareness that she might already be too late to control the fallout, because Jack's vulnerability, laid bare in that tender embrace with Phyllis, was a force that could not be unseen, that could not be erased from memory, and she was painfully aware that the promise he had made, even if innocent in intent, carried ramifications that could extend far beyond the two of them, touching friendships, family ties, business dealings, and past grievances. And as Diane reflected, she felt a pang of envy at the intimacy they had shared, the effortless way Phyllis had reached him in a way that few could, her own past interactions with Jack flashing in her mind, moments of camaraderie, tension, and fleeting closeness, each one now seemingly inadequate in comparison. And yet, even amidst these swirling personal emotions, Diane could not dismiss the strategic angle, the potential advantage or danger that knowledge of this promise afforded her, because Genoa City was not merely a city of relationships. It was a chessboard, each move, each whispered confession, each subtle gesture a piece in a game where loyalties could shift in an instant, alliances could fracture, and hearts could break under the weight of ambition, desire, and unspoken truths, and she could already sense the possibility of explosive confrontations looming on the horizon, the kind that would force Jack, Phyllis, herself, and everyone entangled in this drama to confront truths they might prefer to avoid. And as Diane contemplated the delicate balance between intervention and observation, she realized that any action, or inaction, on her part would carry consequences, potentially setting off a chain reaction that could irreversibly alter relationships, reputations, and even the emotional equilibrium of those involved. While elsewhere in Genoa City, Jack, still leaning against Phyllis, drew a shaky breath, feeling the bittersweet mix of relief, trust, and trepidation coursing through him, because in opening himself to her, he had revealed vulnerabilities that were both necessary and dangerous, and Phyllis, sensing the depth of his inner turmoil, responded with unwavering empathy, each word, each touch, each small gesture designed to reinforce his sense of safety. Yet beneath her outward composure, she herself wrestled with a mixture of hope, fear, and the intoxicating pull of emotions that had long been simmering under the surface. Emotions that now threatened to boil over, threatening to challenge not only their own understanding of each other, but also the intricate web of relationships surrounding them. For Phyllis knew, as Diane would soon realize, that Jack's promise was more than a fleeting sentiment. It was a commitment tinged with the weight of past experiences, regrets, and the unspoken acknowledgement of shared history. And as Jack finally closed his eyes, allowing himself a fleeting moment of surrender, Phyllis gently stroked his hair, feeling the rapid, uneven beat of his pulse beneath her fingertips, a physical reminder of the emotional storm that had brought them to this point, and neither of them noticed the slight shift in the air as Diane retreated further down the corridor, her mind already racing through scenarios, alternative interpretations of Jack's words, and potential courses of action, each more complex and morally ambiguous than the last, because she knew that in Genoa City, nothing existed in a vacuum, and a single overheard promise could ignite conflict, ignite passion, or ignite betrayal, the possibilities limited only by the human heart's capacity for desire, fear, and deception. And as Diane weighed these possibilities, she realized that she was standing at a crossroads, her next move carrying the potential to shape the trajectory of multiple lives. Yet she was paralyzed by the awareness that the delicate moment she had just witnessed, the raw honesty of Jack and Phyllis's presence, could never be replicated or undone, and that any interference could either protect or destroy, could either clarify or complicate, and this recognition made her acutely aware of the precariousness of her position, caught between moral obligation, emotional investment, and strategic calculation, while Jack and Phyllis remained in their own bubble of fragile connection, unaware that the world outside was already shifting in response to their shared intimacy, because in Genoa City, even the most private of moments had a way of spilling into the public sphere, carried on whispers, rumors, and the careful observations of those who lingered just beyond the edges of perception. And as Diane's mind continued to spiral through potential ramifications, she found herself imagining the inevitable confrontations, Victor's wrathful questioning, Nikki's subtle probing, Abby's mischievous plotting, and the quiet, calculating reactions of others who might perceive advantage or threat in this revelation, and each potential scenario was a storm in miniature, each laden with emotion, consequence, and the potential to fracture existing alliances, challenge trust, and expose vulnerabilities, while Jack, still in Phyllis's comforting presence, felt a temporary peace, a sense that he had taken a small step toward reconciling his internal conflicts. Yet even as he closed his eyes, he could not entirely escape the gnawing awareness that the city, the people he cared about, and the secrets surrounding him could erupt into chaos at any moment. And Phyllis, sensing the fragility of the moment, held him closer, aware that this peace, though comforting, was temporary, and that the promise they had shared, however sincere, was vulnerable to exposure, misinterpretation, and the unpredictable dynamics of their intertwined lives. And as Diane finally pulled herself away from the hallway, retreating into her office to process what she had just witnessed, she felt the dual weight of power and responsibility pressing on her shoulders, because she now possessed knowledge that could shape outcomes, influence decisions, and alter relationships. Yet she also understood the moral and emotional peril inherent in acting on this knowledge, knowing full well that a misstep could cause irreversible damage. And as she sat in quiet contemplation, replaying the scene repeatedly in her mind, analyzing each word, each gesture, and each unspoken intention, she recognized the sheer complexity of human emotion, the delicate balance of trust, and the volatile interplay of desire, loyalty, and secrecy that defined their lives. And she understood, with a clarity both exhilarating and terrifying, that the promise Jack had whispered to Phyllis in a moment of pain and vulnerability was no ordinary declaration. It was a fulcrum upon which the delicate, intricate, and often treacherous dynamics of Genoa City might pivot, potentially reshaping friendships, romances, and alliances. And she felt, deep in her chest, a combination of awe, dread, and anticipation at the unfolding drama, knowing that what had begun as a quiet, private moment between two people had already set the stage for a cascade of events that would test hearts, minds, and loyalties. And as she considered her next move, Diane realized that this was a turning point, a critical juncture in which observation, action, or even restraint could lead to consequences that none of them could fully predict, and that the ripples of Jack's whispered promise would extend far beyond the room, far beyond the moment, and far beyond their control, weaving into the complex tapestry of lives, emotions, and ambitions that defined Genoa City, a city where secrets, desires, and revelations were currency, and where even the most intimate of promises could ignite drama capable of altering destinies forever. And so Diane sat, torn between curiosity, strategy, and conscience, fully aware that her next choice would carry weight, and that the lives of Jack, Phyllis, herself, and countless others would inevitably be impacted by the knowledge she now held. And in that moment, a shiver ran down her spine, the mix of fear and excitement reminding her that in the